I'm a member of the Native Plant Society of Texas. We're the Lindheimer Chapter. My name is Debbie Kerouac, and I wanted to cover a couple things about getting our garden into the summer, through the summer. Of course, with the interesting weather that we had in February, I've added a few points from that situation as well. So just a couple things that I was thinking of as I'm thinking about my own garden and going into the summertime. So this is what I plan to cover. I had come across some really good articles over the last month or so through the Native Plant Society about recovering from that freeze. So I thought I'd cover a little bit of that. Ellen's going to speak to you a little bit about some nurseries where you might be able to get plants and some things about those nurseries and our program about plants. And then I have just a couple slides about some summer plant care, just a couple things that popped into my head. And Ellen, I hope maybe you'll help me with that point, some of those points too, if anything comes into your head. So anyway, that's where I'm going to go today. So these are the articles that I ran across that I thought were useful. They just really, you know, stuck with me, and so I stuck them aside, and I'm pulling some information out of these articles. So the first one is called From Ice Storms to Drought. So it actually covered a couple different topics. Planting Your Piece of Texas. Mike Mecke, who's USDA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, SAWS, Texas A&M. He's got quite the resume. So we're always worried about live oaks. And I saw he had a piece about live oaks, so I thought I'd throw this in here. He's suggesting that if you had branches fall off of your oaks during that storm, that you might not want to move any of that wood that you think you're going to use as firewood, or any of those limbs that you've recently taken down, to other locations if you have any concern about oak wilt. The more we move those things around, apparently, the more risk we take. Okay, so you might want to leave it in place for a while until we really get into the heat of the summer, when that threat would be lower. He also suggests that if you're able, if you did have a tree that actually died, maybe leave it standing for a little bit, especially if it's one in your backyard. You know, I know we all want our front yards to look as good as they can, but if you have a dead tree, maybe leave it standing for a while. It does serve a purpose. Just remember that, especially from a native plant perspective, everything out there serves a purpose. Birds will use it as roosting and nesting spots. Small mammals will nest in it. Insects will use it for food. So there is value in that dead tree. He also talked a bit about succulents, like prickly pears and yuccas and all those kinds of things that a lot of us love to grow, and that some of the parts may have turned to mush. So this is from my garden. Now I will admit, this is a blue agave that my sister-in-law brought to me from the LA area. However, when I checked it after the freeze, and it was very mushy, what I did was gently pull away all the parts that were just super mushy and kind of easily detached, and just threw them off. And I thought, it's dead. You know, it was a nice little experiment. And then I went back out one day and went, holy smokes, it's alive. So do not despair. Your plants may still be alive. If those roots are still alive, you may still get some new sprouts. So be gentle with it. I think what I keep reading over and over and over with all these articles and speaking to people is patience. Don't be in a hurry to dig stuff up just because it doesn't look great. And of course, a lot of people's century plants are doing exactly what mine's doing. I lost about half of it, about the lower half. The upper half started looking really nice again, almost right away. And I thought, ooh, maybe it's going to be okay. But there, a lot of these century plants are responding by flowering. So I'll get to enjoy the flowering phase, and maybe it'll put up some pups or whatever. But obviously this century plant is not much longer for my garden. But okay, that's how they are responding. Here's another article I ran across that I thought was very useful. Post-freeze tree care, because trees are a lot of what we're worried about. And Rebecca Johnson, she has a company called Arborholic LLC, and she's an arborist from Austin. So she wrote this article, Post-Freeze Tree Care, and she said some things that I thought were very useful, that damage is going to be different potentially in every one of our properties. Okay, so you're probably talking to your neighbors, your friends, your family, whatever, about, oh, your damage versus their damage, and you can expect it to be a bit different in everybody's property, even the same species of trees. And that's because every one of our properties represents a microclimate. And that is a term that I saw more than once in these articles, that we represent microclimates. There's little things about my yard that are different from somebody else's. You know, how much exact shade, what exact soil composition is it? You know, how much rain has a chance to fall through, whatever. They all, which side of the house are some of these trees on, you know, south facing, north facing, you know, and the genetic lineages of each of these trees is a little bit different. Where was it originally grown? Was it grown near the Gulf? Was it grown closer to here? Right? Texas is an enormous state. So each one of these trees, even though it may come from the same species, is potentially a different genetic lineage too. So just keep that in mind. Everybody's trees may respond differently. She says that you can expect there to have been 2 potential types of damage to your trees. Loading damage refers to what it sounds like, right? What kind of load was on your trees? And this is a picture from her article, as you can see. Ice, snow, anything that loaded up that tree and added weight to it could have caused damage. So the results of that were immediate, they were obvious. You can respond to that. And there's some more information about response to that coming up. Now, the other one is freeze damage. And according to her, we may not know the full extent of freeze damage for many months to come. So you don't know what's going on inside the living tissue of that tree and how much it was affected. But there's a couple more points that she makes. So then she starts talking about rehabilitation. So what do you do for your trees now? You can prune the hanging limbs, especially if you feel it's a safety issue. She also mentions at least a couple times during the article that you don't really need to prune your trees, okay? But if you have a hanging limb and you really feel like it needs to come off, then do that. But she's reminding people that if you're cutting that limb, you need to cut from the bottom of the limb up, because if you cut from top down on a limb, chances are as it breaks, it's going to peel bark down as it breaks, and that more trees are lost because people pruned incorrectly and they let a large piece of bark peel off of their tree, and that's what killed it, not the pruning, not the other damage. Because what you have to realize is that the tree is very much alive just underneath that bark. The part of the tree that conducts sugars up and down is right underneath that bark, and you are stripping it away. Okay, so be careful about the pruning. Obviously, if you're pruning oaks, you really should paint each one of those wounds. And boy, if you can wait until later this summer to do the pruning, that is always advisable. The recommendations these days are to either prune oaks at the coldest time of the year or the hottest time of the year. And I think there's a leaning towards the hottest time because our cool times don't even last that long most years, but our hot times last a lot longer, and they're very stressful times for the trees. So anyway, if you can wait till July to prune, that's advisable. And pruning is oftentimes a two-person job. If you have a few limbs to prune, my husband and I have discovered that same thing, that if you don't have somebody right there with that spray can or whatever it is you're going to paint with, by the time you've pruned a handful of limbs, you've forgotten where half of them are, right? So anyway, this is called a frost crack right here. That's called a frost crack. And she says, go ahead and leave those in the bark if possible. Because again, if you peel off a lot of loose bark from your tree, you could kill it just by peeling all that bark off. So leave as much of it as you can as possible. Don't be in too big a hurry to remove stuff from your tree. I think that's kind of the take-home message from every article I've read. So she's saying, really take care of any immediate health or safety issues. So you obviously don't want a tree limb to fall on your house or fall on people in your yard. Take care of those things if you feel like they're an issue, and then just wait. And one of the things that you can do to test a tree or a shrub, by the way, you could do the same thing, is a scratch test. So just take your thumb and kind of scratch the bark a little bit to see if you see anything green, soft underneath the scratch. Don't do it a lot. Obviously, that's a little bit of damage. But if it's not leafing out yet, it could be just kind of set back, you know, and getting ready to. But if it isn't leafing out yet, that's something you can do to check to see if there's life left in that tree. But again, she kept saying in her article over and over, limit your pruning. Don't be overzealous about the pruning. Just wait, wait, wait. We don't know how many of these trees are still slowly recovering and coming back. Flowering trees, of course, a lot of us have already recognized or realized that some of them aren't going to flower this year. They got caught at exactly the wrong time. And at least as far as shrubs go, I know I saw that with agarita, which is one of my favorite early spring plants. I love those flowers, but a lot of my really well-established agarita were getting ready to bloom when that freeze happened. And of course, all those blooms froze. But I did see like brand new little soft branches, you know, the little that ended up blooming a little bit later. But yeah, you may have missed the flowering for some of your flowering trees this year, and that is what it is, right? Better luck next year. Okay. Then the last couple things that she said about rehabilitation is that don't hesitate to water. Now, if you're like me, we just had 6.5 inches of water, right, over those last few storms. So the trees are probably fine for a while, but if you haven't had any recent rain, then you want to water about an inch worth of rain, about an inch worth every 2 weeks. So you don't have to water every other day or anything like that. The trees don't need that much, but a good soaking about every 2 weeks. Mulching is always a fun topic to cover. I see so many mistakes made with mulching, for crying out loud, especially with trees. What is it with mulching up to the tree trunk that people keep wanting to do? That's not where you need the mulch. I never even really thought about this completely until I took a landscaping class through Lady Bird Johnson. But the place where the tree would need mulch is way out there where the roots are. It doesn't need mulch right up there by the trunk. That's not doing any good at all. In fact, you're probably going to cause mold to form if you mulch it too close. But I'm going to come back and belabor that point again later. Anyway, consider if you're going to mulch it further out to the drip line, which is where your tree canopy, kind of extends to, right? Mulch way out there. And she says, don't fertilize yet. Because if a tree is recovering, then it's going to prioritize its new growth over what it should be doing, which is repairing, right? It should be given time to repair. So let it do that. Anyway, I thought she had lots of great points. So there's my favorite mulching picture. I snagged that from Texas A&M, but this is no. Please don't ever do that. You are going to cause the roots to come way up into that mulch instead of be way down deep in the ground where they need to be. You could cause molding up close to that trunk, and that's not even where that tree can use the mulch. So please don't do that. And I see landscapers do that all around commercial plantings too. I'm like, ah. Anyway, that is not helping any trees. Okay, then I had one other article that I thought was useful, and it kind of segues into what I'm going to have Ellen talk about. So it was effects of the freeze on our native plants, and a little bit more talking about urban landscaping, which a lot of us are in that position where we're, living in a little bit more urban environment. But this is a landscape architect, Mike Pessin, I think is the way it's pronounced. Anyway, he made a couple good points, and they're things that's sort of been rolling around in my brain, but he really solidified a couple things I hadn't thought about. He's saying he's always liked using native plants, always thought about native plants, and this freeze that happened recently really brought home the idea of native plants. We have been kind of drifting away and branching out and trying new things for quite a long time. And that's okay to a point. We've adopted all these fun little imports and various cultivars of our favorite plants. But, and I'm going to kind of talk about two different things here, but if you are in an urban environment, something to think about is the fact that you really have some microclimates if you're in an urban setting, because all around your house are various artificial shelters. The house itself, maybe you have a fence, maybe you have, a driveway and then the edge off of that. All around your urban setting are lots of little microclimates. And if you chose your plants carefully and they got some shelter, then even though you may have imports and cultivars in your landscape, they might have done okay. Those imports and cultivars did not do as well if they were away from the shelter of that particular microclimate that was allowing them to survive previously. So what he's saying is that we may need to rein this in a little bit more and be more thoughtful, especially if you're not planting these different plants in places where they have the correct shelter, the correct microenvironment. Native plants are always going to be better prepared and better resilient, have better resiliency, I guess, than any of these other cultivars. And like I said before, the source of that plant could affect its survival. Was it originally grown at the coast and then brought here? Was it originally grown more East Texas and then brought here? Where did that particular plant come from? And that's something that your nursery might know. So I'll point to you in a minute, Ellen. And of course, if you had a better established plant, you probably noticed that it fared better than something you just put in the ground. I know I experienced that. I had 2 lantanas, native lantanas, I was so happy to have. And at least for now, so I'm not giving up hope yet, but at least for now, I'm not seeing a sign of either one. But they were some of my newer plants. Oh, and I had an anacacho orchid that was about that big. I think it's gone. So if they were better established, there's a chance that they survived that whole business. So his take-home message from his article was that, and I like his phrase there, zone denial. So if you're living in zone denial, you're branching out and bringing in plants from other, zones, close by zones, just remember it comes with a risk, right? And you better be taking even more care of that particular plant. And another thing to think of is that, yes, our natives are tough, but the endemics, and the term endemic is going to be a big one. I wonder if that's going to show up more and more. Endemic means that not only is it a native plant, but it's native to this locale. That means it truly belongs here. So many of us are growing agaves, and yeah, they do fine here, and they are from Texas, but they're actually native to high deserts, not specifically the San Antonio region, but high deserts. So that's why some of them took a much harder hit than some of the fun little wildflowers that you probably see popping up all over your yard, or you might be actually cultivating as part of your landscape. So what specifically belongs here is what is always going to do best. Everything else we're going to have to take care of sometimes, extra care. Anyway, I thought that was a really good take-home message. So, see, I told you it was a perfect segue. So Ellen, I'm going to let you take over and talk a little bit about our partner nurseries. Ellen, you're muted.
There, I'm on now.
There we go. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, I lost the program for a minute or so. Anyway, Canyon Lake Ace Hardware. Good, you've got the addresses down. That is in Sattler, and they are really good about working with us to get native plants. They get a lot of their plants from a grower just north of Austin, so still in central Texas area. Linda Sue is the one who does the ordering, and she's well versed in them, and that's probably the one I go to the most because it's closest. And when she sees me coming, she already knows where to show me they've got the plants. Um, she does have a wait list. Now, the other nurseries may have it. I didn't know about it till one time I came. I said, "Oh, you sold out of that one? I wanted one of those." "Oh, well, I'm going to get it in next week's truck." Okay, so she put me on a list and would pull off how many ever I wanted and set them aside to make sure when I came in, or she would call me or text me and say, "They're in." And I would be able to get mine before they sold out again. So something to ask maybe the other nurseries, if you're closer to one of these others, is if they don't have the plant you want, or maybe it's too early for that plant to come in, do they have a list where you can put down your name and specifically the plant you're looking for and get first grabs, kind of like a pre-order? Um, that was about it for them. Open every day. South Texas growers, just west of 281 on 46. They are primarily suppliers for landscapers, but they are open to the public. And Joanne and her husband are the owners. She also has been really good working with us with our chapter when we do the native plant class, and she can point me right to the natives. She knows where they are. Her staff is pretty well instructed on the natives. She may have somewhat limited hours. I think they close at 4 or 5. So if you go in the evening or try to go on a Sunday, they're not going to be open. But you can check their website, and they do grow some of their own plants. She and her husband go out to West Texas and pick up plants. So as Debbie talked about, was you might want to try one of those plants, but be aware it's from a different growing area, and most likely a different zone. So there's that risk you've got to be willing to take, especially if you're buying a large plant. It's going to cost more money, and most of her trees are in 5-gallon pots, so they're going to be more expensive, and you have to make sure that you have a place to dig a hole for a 5-gallon pot. I have got to the point where I go dig the holes and then figure out, okay, what will grow in this amount of sun and water and such, because I have so many rocks that I'm kind of limited by how deep I can dig, what I can put there. Spring Creek Gardens is just south of the post office, just south of 306. And they are our most recent nursery. If you like wine, this might be the nursery for you. They have, in addition to the plants, they have a bunch of wine, kind of like a coffee bar, but it's a wine bar, and you can buy a card and it dispenses whatever 4 ounces of wine. So you can have wine while you shop. They have a wide variety of plants, but as far as natives go, they're still a little limited. But they are working on building buildings where they can have classes in the future. So kind of watch on their website for what they have as far as speakers and such. And King Feed, last but not least, is in Wimberley, and we also have a new address. They are also in Sattler, and that address is 768 FM 2673. They're right down the road on the same side of the road as Canyon Lake Ace Hardware. And they have quite a few natives. And I think they're open every day except Sunday. So again, check their websites. One thing I would say for any nursery you go to is not all the staff is going to have the same amount of knowledge. And some of the people might be brand new employees where they're just learning about the nurseries from the start. Most of us would probably may know more than they do. So wherever you go to a nursery, you might want to ask them to get best choice is what days are your deliveries, if they have regular deliveries, and what time does the truck come in? Usually they come in the morning, but I'll go to Ace and I can almost pick it off the truck. They put them off to the side, and people are already shopping before they ever get into the nursery area in the first place. Again, ask if there's a wait list, if there's something specific you're looking for. And one of our members suggested no matter where you go is the first question, where are your natives? They're not always going to be grouped together, but the more we ask for the native plants, the more we can show the nurseries that we're interested in buying them. They're in the business to make money, and they will get them if there's enough demand. So we need to provide that demand. And I think it'll be slow going perhaps, but as long as we're persistent, and then you've got to go back and buy it. You can't just ask them to get it. We need to be patronizing them. Some of the staff may not know, but they can help you look for it.
Ellen,
And then Debbie.
I was going to interject. I don't know if you've ever run into this, but I did once at South Texas Growers, and I love that place. But I came with both the common name and the scientific name of a particular plant I wanted. And the staff was getting very confused about the common name I was using until I went for the scientific name. So it's not necessarily what I would lead off with, but if
Right.
you're going in odd directions, sometimes it helps to have that with you.
Right, and that's one of the things that I had down was to be a good consumer, go in a little informed. So no matter what the knowledge level of the staff member you're dealing with, you've got that genus and species name, because they can be the same genus, but, and I've run into this, one is native and the other species is from South America. So they say, oh yeah, we've got that one. Well, not exactly. And it could make a big difference in your garden. Also ask them, and sometimes that information is on the tag, where that plant was grown. And Debbie alluded to this earlier. Is it from Central Texas or is it from California or the East Coast? It can make a huge difference on the success of that plant, even in a normal year. You may want to have a list with what kind of garden are you trying to put together? A pollinator garden? Are you working for the monarchs? You can go to websites that will give you lists of plants, hummingbird garden kind of thing, and give you specifics if you're not familiar with what those plants are. Don't forget to check the clearance table. Oh my gosh, I've got some great deals on the clearance table. Sometimes they look at it and went, oh, here, you just take this home. That's one benefit of getting to know the people at that particular nursery is when they see you come in, often they may not know your name, but they remember having seen you. And sometimes they just want those plants off the clearance. So I brought them home and they've done very well. It takes a little longer, but they come around. As far as planting, I tend to go with the smaller size because they seem to acclimate faster than if I put a larger plant in, because it looks great. It's going to look great right away. Again, patience, but I just have more success starting with the smaller plant and just waiting till it catches up to the other ones. On the big box stores, I just wrote a note that they kind of get their orders one size fits all, where they don't have a lot of control over what plants come in. So they may have natives, go and check, but again, they may be grown in another part of the country. And as far as informed consumer, there's a couple websites. The ones that I use the most are the one from Lady Bird Johnson is wildflower.org, and they have a native plant list. Now, those native plants are across the whole country, but you can put the filter on and say, I just want plants from Texas. And that will help you learn about whether the plant you're looking at is going to fit your microclimate. NPSOT, NPSOT.org, our organization, has plant profiles on the website. And then www.seedsource.com is the Native American seed company out of Junction. They have just a tremendous amount of information. You can go on there and request a catalog or look at it online. I especially like in their catalog, they show the exotic, like grasses, the invasives that you for sure want to get out of your yard. And I've already pulled out Malta star thistle, so I know it's out there getting ready. It made it through the freeze, unfortunately.
So did mine.
But they get pictures. Yeah, they give pictures and then show you where it came from. And so even if you don't order anything from them, it's a great resource to have. And I see you have the nice program up.
I did.
This is how we work with the nurseries, our partner nurseries, to encourage them to get the natives in. And within our chapter, we have a committee, and we meet to look at all the natives that grow well here in Central Texas. Try to recommend 3 to 4 per season, like the spring bloomers, the summer bloomers, the fall bloomers. And then if we come up with anything that has some winter interest, like possum haw, this is our choices for this year. We do this once a year, and we try to put on there, like on the first one, spring obedient plant. You can see the butterfly hummers. I'm not sure what that other insect.
Bees?
And deer. So we try to say what use it is to the wildlife. And if people say, well, I want to plant the deer won't eat, well, good luck. I just checked my, I bought Indian blanket and put it in because I haven't had any on my property. And this morning I checked it and the deer ate all the flowers off. They left the plant, but they ate the flowers. And so now I got to get another fence and put that around. But yeah, we have a herd of 20 roaming our neighborhood right now. So, but this is something you can look at. This is a sign that we have at our partner nurseries, and they're listed at the bottom. So we will soon be working on what plants we think we'd like to recommend for next year, but the other chapters put these out as well, and they may have totally different choices for this year. So you might see, like at South Texas Growers, where the Bernie group sends their choices over and we send ours over, and Joanne puts everybody's up. You'll see a wider variety every year because we rarely recommend the same ones at the same time. And then in we have a brochure here that we hand out about alternatives, native plants that can be put up or planted instead of what we previously called exotics. The state committee decided we don't really want to use the word exotics with our nurseries because some of them carry some of the things we are trying to shun, but this gives alternatives. For example, instead of let me pick Vitex, which I know is a popular plant, we would recommend a Mexican plum or Anacacho orchid tree or a Mexican buckeye as an alternative to the Vitex. I would say all three of those. So I think that's about it. Oh, okay. And in return for them putting up with this for us, we add their name on the back of the brochure. So we give them some free advertising and they get natives in for us to buy.
How is the stock looking for this year? Is it still pretty lean?
You know, I was over at Ace and they had not as many natives as they've had before, but I think their variety is close. And it also might be like Blackfoot daisies seem to sell out pretty fast. So I didn't see any there, but I have seen them there. And I know that Linda Sue gets a lot of those ordered because they're in fairly big demand. So again, it just depends what day. If you get there Thursday after the truck has been unloaded, you get a pretty good chance. But she did say they're having trouble getting certain plants. I got put on a wait list for a plant and she said, now, you know, I may not have this till next year. It's like, okay. So, so that's something, but they're all running into the same problem. You will see a price increase probably from last year, and it's just supply and demand.
Right. Okay. Well, I have just a couple I have one last, there's a couple other resources. The Grow Green book is something that our Native Plant Society always sells whenever we're selling plants somewhere or we're at any kind of event. But you can now find that online too. And that's another nice little resource. So I discovered that recently, that it is online. Sometimes you can find some good things in the garden style SA, but they're not going to be all natives. You'll have to pay close attention to that one. But anyway, there. So Ellen, you gave some really good resources. These are a couple more that I had thought of previously, so I just threw them back in here again. And of course, Bethany will have these too if you need to get back to her about that. But my last point, and again, Ellen, interject if you think of something, and we only have a little bit of time left, but I was thinking about, what would I be doing as I'm going into the summer? I'm usually at the end of putting plants in the ground at this point, which is not to say that you couldn't still put some in, but I'm kind of finishing that idea out. What about mulch? So a lot of people have different opinions about mulch. Personally, over the last, I don't know, year or so, I have come to really embrace decomposed granite. I think it looks more natural around here. So if you want your garden area to look more natural, that really works well. And I don't put it too thick. So that's another thing that we keep coming back around to. You should be able to, after a rain, if you stick your finger into the ground near your plant and it feels dry, then your mulch isn't doing what you want mulch to do, right? It's actually preventing the water from getting down to your plants rather than keeping it there. So I never put mine more than an inch or so thick. I also find it very funny that people will scoop up oak leaves, and I had to take some rosemary out. So I had these piles that I was noticing that kind of came up because of pulling the rosemary out. But I find it interesting that people will bag up all this wonderful material into black bags and put it out at the curb for the trash to pick up, and then they'll go to Lowe's and pick up mulch. Didn't you have mulch already? So this is what I was doing yesterday, bucketing up all this, and it was all nicely partially decomposed oak leaves because they've been there a couple of years. And I just started picking up buckets full and sprinkling them around. And remember, not up close, but sprinkle it around, sprinkling it around some of my newest trees and shrubs and every other place that I could find to put some of those lovely oak leaves, because it's great mulch. But like I said, just make sure the water can penetrate through that. Okay, don't put it down so thick. But that's my
And
opinion
Deb,
about mulching.
on that decomposed granite, if you go and buy it already bagged at like Lowe's or Home Depot, it can be pretty expensive. If you have access to a pickup truck, go to a stone yard and have them dump a big scoop in your truck. It weighs a lot, because I went and they said, "Well, how big is your truck?" And they adjusted the scoop to make sure I didn't have too much weight. But it was way less expensive buying it in bulk. You just have to get it out of the truck and onto your gardens. So
Yeah.
it's a great workout, and to do early in the morning, and you don't need your truck for a while, because you think, oh, that doesn't look like much, but oh yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah,
But it's way cheap. Yeah.
we actually had some delivered because we were doing a couple different things. So I still have a pile I'm taking from. But yes, that was well worth the delivery. We're getting into right now. Recently, we had a whole bunch of rain, but we're about to get into the hot and dry part of the year. So what about watering? So I don't have a sprinkler system on my property. I water by hand if I water at all. I try not to water more than about one time per week, because again, these are natives. They're not expecting a sprinkler system that's watering them every other day. That's not what they're looking for. That's not how they grow best, and they need to put down deep roots. They won't put down deep roots if you're watering them all the time. So, and I tend to water little bits at a time. I like the small sips method. So I'll walk around with my watering can and I'll do little bit, little bit, little bit, and then I'll make another round, little bit, little bit, little bit, rather than drowning them. That's my method of watering. And that's kind of the way we've been doing it at our native garden that we have out at Guadalupe River State Park. And it seems to work really well. So I've embraced the small sips method. And I don't water a lot. Some of your plants just don't even want it if they're native. And then the last thing I just thought of before I sat down today was, oh, what about pruning and deadheading? Do I want to recommend that? Well, I don't do a lot of that personally, I will tell you. But as I have learned recently, some of the salvia, especially that shrubby Salvia greggii, the, oh, what are all the different names it goes by? What's that?
Autumn sage.
Yeah, autumn sage. Anyway, it can get really leggy, and if you don't want it to look like that, I have been told that it is recommended that you can prune it down some in the middle of the summer too, and it will revive. And the same thing about deadheading. That's, to me, that's a balancing thing because I like to be able to collect seed. So the more old blooms I pluck off before they have a chance to go to seed, the less seed I will have. So I personally don't tend to do a lot of deadheading, but obviously if you want to see the continued flowering, that's something you might want to do. So that kind of depends on what your final goal is. Do you want to be able to collect seeds, or do you want to be able to leave seeds on the plant for your wildlife, or do you want to see it flowering? You can do a little bit of both. Anyway, that was my wisdom for today. We might have a couple minutes for questions. I didn't look at the chats at all. So Bethany, do we have any questions?
We have one. The first question was, I have a bunch of century plants with scorched leaf tips. Should these be cut off or left? My inclination is to leave them for now.
Yeah, I've seen some of that being done. I wouldn't cut anything off. If the whole leaf dies and you can pull that out, I would do that. But I hesitate to cut off leaf tips. And I was in Seven Hills Ranch recently off of 1863, and I don't know if it was a landscaper or a homeowner that did it, but they had been cutting off the old leaves from their century plants probably every year, and it was becoming this weird tall thing. Doesn't look right at all. Like, I don't know why you would do that. Anyway, personal preference. I would not do that to the plant. It's not meant to be cut like that.
So we have 2 fig trees in the back. They're fine. And I'm the type of person, I don't like too many trees because that means a lot of leaves close to home. So my husband likes also lemon trees, and we're thinking about adding those, but are they prone to drop leaves?
I don't grow lemons.
Oh.
So I don't know. I just grow a bunch of native stuff. So I'm sure they're
lime's
all
native here?
I'm sorry?
Is lime's native here? What
No.
fruit is native?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Any particular fruit trees that are native that you would know?
Not any that you eat. I only grow them for the wildlife. I don't grow them for myself. And I'm pretty sure those are going to be deciduous.
Yeah.
I'm just going to guess that all those fruit trees are going to be deciduous, and they're probably going to lose leaves every fall.
Okay.
That'd be my bet.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know a lot of people grow citrus here, but it isn't native this far north.
Mhm.
Nope. Nope.
Another question. I
Yes.
have like a 5-year-old research tree,
Hmm.
and it kind of had 2 tiny leaves, but I've got growth at the bottom. Now, I mean, I'm leaving the top because it's right by a little pond and the birds like, you know, preening in there.
Hmm.
What's the long-term prospect for it?
I've heard a little bit of chatter about Weesatch. Basically, the kind of the rule of thumb that, and the same thing that I said from those other articles, I'm hearing, be patient. If you can hang on and not prune any of it back for just a little while longer, see what leaves out. You may end up having to prune it some, but
I've definitely got growth at the bottom, and I also have
right.
a granite tree that's doing the same. I've got growth at the bottom, but
Mhm.
nothing on the top.
Yeah. So I think there's still some reviving and repairing that's going on.
Okay,
So
I'm
I
good.
think we're all just trying to be as patient as we can possibly be.
Good.
And
Thank you.
some of those might end up being more shrub-like than the tree they used to be.
Hmm.
Oh, that's okay. This little tree planted itself anyway.
There you go. So it can be what it wants to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, wild persimmon you can definitely eat. Yeah. If you want to know how to make jam, Gretchen is your person. She knows how to eat a lot of that.
I like how you said eat a lot of that, not make a lot of that. So.
Absolutely. Unless there's any other questions, I think that was about the sum total of what I thought of for today. And yeah, well, it'll be an interesting summer. We'll see how it shapes up and whether it's hotter than usual, or, you know, are we done with rain now that we got our 6 inches? I don't know. It's different every year.
every it's
Mhm.
2021. Who knows what we'll get this summer?
Mhm.
But
Expect the unexpected.
there we go. Well, Debbie and Ellen both, thank y'all so much. I know I learned a lot, and I'm excited. I'm excited to go out there and work in my yard after this. Y'all always get me pumped up, so appreciate it.
I keep watching new little leaves come out, so I'm not going to lose hope on really any plant just yet.
And this isn't native, but my oleanders just sprigged out right after the rain, and I had cut them down in a little bit, and I was
Yep.
thinking about pulling them up, and I was like, I'll give them a few more months, and there they came.
Exactly.
So yeah.
They're all coming back. I know. I'm seeing more and more things come back. I lost about half of a beautiful rock rose, but the bottom half is fine, and it's just going to be a smaller shrub for the next year or so, but it's going to be fine again. So
Yeah,
yep.
my rock roses, they'd hardly even, I guess it was on the correct side of the house away from things, but they were putting back out, I mean, a week after it. I was surprised.
Yeah. I had a couple really woody stems that seemed to have cracked. They must have gotten that freeze, you know, and they cracked. So I lost like the whole top of it, but it's fine. It's coming back.
They're resilient. Yep. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you
Thanks.
next time.